All right, we're just going to give it a few seconds to let people enter the room. I can see lots of people are coming in now. And we're looking forward to welcoming you in a minute. There we go. I can see the numbers going up, up, up. This has turned out to be a hugely popular program, by the way, and we're very excited about that. So for all of you who are joining. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Dinda Elliott, Director of Programs at China Institute, and we are so delighted that you're able to join us for what's going to be a fascinating program. As you know, China Institute is dedicated to informing the public about China through a School of Chinese Studies, a gallery, and a host of public programs about arts and culture, business, technology, and society. Please do follow us on Twitter and other social media platforms and join us as a member. Membership is inexpensive and it gives you all sorts of discounts, but most importantly, it helps us bring you great programs like today's. With today's public program, we're absolutely thrilled because we have three of the very top English Chinese translators in the world. This is also thrilling because this event really embodies everything that China Institute aims to achieve, informing the public about China and promoting understanding between the US and China. These three people are literally the bridge builders. They are literally bringing Chinese culture to us. So thank you all for that. I'm delighted that we are co-presenting today's program with the Paper Republic, which you will hear about more in a bit. So some quick introductions and then we'll jump in. Eric Abrahamsen's translations have appeared in the New Yorker, Granta, and N+1, among many other venues, and he's the recipient of translations grants from PEN and the NEA. He helps run Paper Republic, which promotes the translation of Chinese literature into English. Nicky Harman lives in the UK and translates full-time from Chinese, focusing on fiction, literary, nonfiction, and occasionally poetry. She's also a trustee at Paper Republic. And I will say just a wonderful side note is that when I asked Nicky what she was drinking just now, she said she's drinking hot Coca-Cola with ginger in it, which apparently is a popular something or other in Beijing. So she'll tell us about that if you want to know more later. Jianan Qian is a staff writer at The Millions, which is an independent literary website. And she's a writer who works in both Chinese and English. In Chinese, she's published 4 original works and translated 4 books, including Flannery O'Connor's Mystery and Manners and The Habit of Being. She holds an MFA in fiction from the Iowa Writers Workshop and is currently pursuing a PhD in creative writing in English at the University of Southern California. And another side note I will add is that when we talked about what we were drinking, Jianan said that she's drinking English breakfast tea. So you can see a cross-cultural thing going on already, just between our speakers. So, all right, let's jump in. The title of this event poses the question, what's the problem with Chinese literature in the West? And that question was really brought to our attention by a brilliant article by translator Dylan Levy-King for Radii, who I hope is tuned in today. And the article talked about the idea that a number of problems exist in the world of Chinese English translation that are significantly affecting what many Western readers have access to in English. So I want to start by asking you all what's going on. Eric, maybe you can help us set the stage by explaining what factors shape which pieces of Chinese literature make it into English.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. So these will be broad strokes necessarily. Obviously, there's some generalizations that'll have to be made in order to make sense here. But I think that the landscape has been changing steadily but slowly over the past several decades. And sort of early on, I'm talking mostly about the US here, but I think this applies to the UK as well. Early on, I think what got selected for translation was largely the province of academia. This was, mostly professors of Chinese culture or history or literature, often who were doing their own translations and choosing books on a criteria of sort of what's important to the history of Chinese literature as a whole, and usually that'll overlap with what we would consider good books, what your regular reader might be interested in, but not always. There's also been an issue with academia that while the books usually come out with university presses, and while they're often really good translations and beautifully designed and everything, university publishing houses are not really well known for their marketing oomph. So a lot of these books were translated, done very well, published, no one ever heard about them. So there's a lot of books, I think, in university libraries around the country that no one's even aware exist. And there's been sort of a real sort of disconnect between the academic publishing world and the commercial publishing world. The publishing houses that you might expect to be able to get a book in front of regular readers. And I don't know, ultimately, those are the people that we need to reach if we want these books to get published, to get a high profile, and to be read. So I would say that over the past maybe 10 or 15 years, there has been a very encouraging, steady trend of commercial publishers, just regular old publishing houses, learning more about Chinese fiction, taking the time to educate themselves, finding the right people to talk to. So that's, I hope where we come in. I'll leave it at that for now. There's a lot more to talk about, but that's sort of, I would say that's the general gist of things now.
Right. Okay. So we definitely want to come back to that in the question of, are we reading the right books? Are we reading the books we should be reading about, that are coming out of China, et cetera? Let's come back to that later. But first, let's turn to China and what's going on in China these days. Jianan, you've been writing in Chinese. You've been part of the Chinese publishing scene. You know that world very well. So tell us a little bit about what Chinese readers are reading. What are Chinese readers interested in? Because one of the things that was so surprising to us about that article that we read was the idea that the books that we read in translation are not necessarily the most popular books in China. And that is of course obvious to you all, but it wasn't obvious to me at all. And so, we're curious about what Chinese readers are interested in, and why isn't there a direct correlation between what people in China are reading and what gets translated into English? So talk a little bit about that, Jianan.
Yeah, I will start by just going back a little bit about Dylan's essay, because Dylan started out by introducing the Douban Year of the End, like a book recommendation list. It's Douban is a very popular website, especially like among young readers. And then we also, I would say we are very critical young readers and members, users of Douban website, because we give our recommendations, or we mark those books we like. We mark the books we like, we only like. And then and then Dylan was actually very surprised. The Year of End Douban book list. Yeah. All the books listed on that were never heard of by the English-speaking world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then when I first moved to the United States, I was also I'm not very surprised, but like Eric just mentioned, I saw a lot of books, a lot of Chinese literature. I could only check out from some university libraries. They were there. They were good at translations, and they were considered like the canonical Chinese literature. And then a lot of great authors from my father's generation got translated into English, and usually they are also considered very famous in China as well. But they are never popular. And when people mention them here in the United States, people always put like political labels on them. Mark them as, the most brave voices coming from the Chinese side, who dare to speak against some, political system or something. But that's not even my take. That's not even my take on those authors. And then the Year of End Douban list, which means a lot of those writers are young writers, because I was interested in that list because of very selfish reason, my book, my latest essay collection was also in that list. So then
Bravo.
the young authors, most of the young authors, they are not even, they are not, they might not even get an opportunity to be translated into English. So there is a huge gap between the Chinese side and the English speaking world.
Can I jump in for a second, Jianan, to ask you to explain a little bit? So describe what you mean by the books that were published from your father's generation. And you said, it's interesting to me that you said they were really never very popular, but they were published and they were big, important books. I mean, tell about what's the difference in perspective,
okay. Yeah. Okay. I need to make a sort of like a correction. I don't mean they are never popular. They are, I would say there is a generational like a change now happening in China. When I mention the authors from my father's generation, I would also say they are great authors. One of the authors that I admire, like really, really much is Yu Hua. Yu Hua is still very popular, and they are great authors as well. And they got translated into English. So they are great authors. But the thing is, young readers in China, we are also eager and we are also very, very interested in seeing young authors, seeing new voices in China. Because my father's generation, those authors, they've been through some nationwide like political storms, such as the Cultural Revolution. So they, like in the United States, we have the great American novel. In China, we also have the great Chinese novel. So for my father's generation, they always dream about, writing a great Chinese novel that encompass all those political movements in China, which they think will, help record the national history. And then for the young readers, for us, because we grew up in a more peaceful time, and also the era we grew up in endorses individuality. So we think, it's not only collective life experience that matters, or a national history that matters more than individual history. We want to see more stories, and we also want to write more personal stories because we think those stories matter. And then we also think, our father's generation, their literary standard is kind of like narrow-minded in our view, because they really prioritize like a realistic tradition. And for us, we think, the artistic elements in fiction sometimes matter more than the political or the social message the fiction carries. So we do a lot of experimental writings as well, and we also want to expand the scope of the so-called mainstream Chinese tradition, which is realistic writing. So we do a lot of those things. And then I think the thing goes back to the translation problems. The thing about that is in China, there is a younger generation that aspires to stretch the or to redefine like contemporary Chinese literature. But those efforts are not seen by the English-speaking world. And also, I don't know whether they would be paid attention to, because they're like contemporary Chinese literature is always marketed as political, sort of.
Right. Thank you so much. That's so fascinating, and I think one of the reasons that this conversation is so interesting and actually so important is because it really touches on the big broad theme of how the West views China, and are we trapped in certain, trapped by looking at China through certain prisms. So Nicky, I wanted to ask you, and all of you, but Nicky, let's give you a chance to chat for a minute. Talk a little bit about how that idea that English translation is often shaped by, number one, the idea that Chinese fiction's main function is to explain China somehow.
Yeah.
And secondly, is there a political prism that publishers, they don't know a whole lot about China, but they know a little bit about China. And so they might, have just read the newspaper and sort of see China through that prism. And are we trapped by that somehow?
Yeah, I think that anyone who translates from Chinese is going to say the same thing, because I heard it on a Zoom event actually this lunchtime. First of all, marketing is a big factor, and some publishers, not all, but some publishers will go for the banned in China label because they reckon it sells. Well, if it ever did sell, it's very, very old hat. It sold an awful long time ago. I honestly do not believe now that anyone is really interested in a book because it was, quote unquote, banned in China. And actually, we do on Paper Republic a roll call at the end of every year where we publish a list of all the books that have come out in translation during the year. And I had a look at 2020 today, and not a single one was banned in China. There was one by Fang Fang, the Wuhan Diaries,
right,
which was slightly less than popular with certain people, but as far as I know, it wasn't banned, and you can still read it in China and in Chinese. Anyway, that's the marketing aspect, the label. I think we can kind of dismiss that fairly easily because I feel that is really on the way out. But one of the problems with having a literature which for Western readers is strange because it deals with different backgrounds, different culture, a whole lot of different aspects of society, the way people live, people's preoccupations, and so on, which you could say actually about literature from anywhere that isn't Anglophone, is that people do tend to read it as if it were reportage on that country, instead of being a work of imaginative literature. Then you get into that very frustrating situation where the reviewer is reviewing it as if it were a portrait of China, a piece of sociology, a newspaper article instead of a novel. And so they never get around to saying whether they actually think it's a good novel. And that is very frustrating. Oh, I feel frustrated about that. I mean, a very good friend of mine read a novel I translated by a quite well-known woman writer called Xu Xiaobin. It's translated as Crystal Wedding. And it's about basically how horrible it is for her living in China as a woman writer. But it's imaginative, it's a novel. Anyway, my good friend read it and said, oh, I had no idea that was what China was like. I didn't want her to react like that. I wanted her to react as, well, that's a really good novel, or it wasn't a really good novel.
Right.
There is this gap in expectations, gap in understanding. And I don't know, we're going to kind of come on and talk about funding as well, or is that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Why don't you jump in? I'm very interested. I mean, we'll come back to some of the things you just talked about, but yeah, let's the funding. Who decides what gets published? How does that work? Where does the funding come from?
That's okay. So this sort of actually ties on to what Nicky and Jianan were just saying. I think the desire for literature that somehow explains China or represents China is kind of ironically, this desire exists inside China as well. Jianan's talking about the generation of writers who want to write the great Chinese novel,
Right.
And this is not just the older generations. There are some younger. They're about my age, which I would still consider a younger generation of writers.
Children.
who are like, who have taken this mantle onto themselves and are trying to write novels that explain some aspect of the Chinese psyche or aspect of Chinese history or whatever, some sort of big explanatory thing. And so that desire exists inside China as well, and it exists within the sort of hierarchies, the power structures within the Chinese literary world. And those power structures are the ones that provide the funding. In as much as there is any funding for translating Chinese fiction, which is always a big if, it usually comes from within the Chinese government, and it's often attached to, the Writers Association or these sort of like, I don't know, sort of Soviet style, government bodies.
Right, interesting.
A real anxiety within that world that people outside of China are reading the right Chinese fiction. And I like talking to these people. The adjective that always comes up is important. 重要. Is this writer important? We want to make sure that the most important Chinese writers and important Chinese literature is getting promoted abroad. And you're like, well, okay, is important, is that the same as good? Is that the same as a good book?
Yeah.
Probably not. There's something more in there. So it's very odd because that desire exists both inside and outside of China, and it's expressed a little bit differently. Obviously, outside of China, the publisher wants an effective label that used to be banned in China. Then it was like, there's sex in China, and hey, there's drugs in China. They want some sort of an explanatory label that they can put on the book. Inside China, it's more like, does this reflect our national values and whatever, the sort of the things that are the experiences of the Chinese people. But it's a very similar urge both inside and outside of China.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. And I know that Nicky, you wanted to jump in. I want you to jump in. And also, Jianan, I want you to talk about your experience with the Writers Association. But to play devil's advocate for a second, isn't it okay and also kind of perfectly natural that we would be interested, I'm talking about, dumb Americans like me, would be interested in books that are written by people who are sort of, fighting against the system in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it is an authoritarian government. It is different from America. And there are people who are struggling, and there is that whole side of China, which is not all of China by any means, but it is a part of China and an important part of China. Isn't it sort of understandable that we would be interested in those kinds of books?
Yeah, but the problem is that the funding doesn't go to those kind of books. Actually, I kind of slightly disagree with you, Eric, because I know one publisher in the UK that funds all its books through Chinese organizations. All the translation is paid for. But that does mean, like Jianan said, the young writers don't get a look in because they're not important enough.
Right.
A lot of women writers don't get a look in because they're not considered important enough. The middle-aged male writers do get published in translation. But to come back to what you were saying, the important thing about Chinese literature for me is that there is such an enormous variety, such a huge range. Some people don't talk about politics at all.
Yes. Right.
No, I was just thinking there's like an example that keeps popping up in my head when we talk about these things is the author Can Xue, who is really one of the best represented Chinese authors in English translation out there. She's got multiple novels, which as far as I can tell are honestly popular. People
type her name into the chat, somebody, so that,
Here. And she writes, Can Xue. She writes this weird, surrealist, like fever dream kind of. These books are it's like looking into her dreaming mind. Okay. She is not representative of anything. She doesn't explain anything to anybody except what strange ideas are in her head, and these sort of like almost color paintings that she's doing with language. Inside China, they're like, who? Why are you all reading that person? And outside of China, I can't imagine that that her readers are like, oh yes, now I'm going to sit down and read a book about China, and I'll come away.
But your point is that Can Xue is actually, you think, a great writer.
I think her books are pretty weird. It's not my taste. But I think that Can Xue represents what we would want to see more of, which is a completely idiosyncratic, individual point of view that is disconnected from the projects of promoting Chinese literature from the inside and the projects of, like publishing the newest, hottest band thing from China.
Right. So Jianan, jump in, please.
Okay, just two things. First of all, I'm a big fan of Can Xue's. literature. And she's considered actually a very important writer. Important not in the sense that represents, the collective life experience or some Chinese history, but important in terms of her artistic contribution to the contemporary Chinese literature. Her voice is very important. And then I would say two things. I have mixed feelings about the political labor that's enforced on a lot of like contemporary Chinese works, because some of the labors are just wrong. For example, once I was very, very surprised to read, I think it's from the Time magazine. They refers to the Nobel Prize winner, Mo Yan, as one of the most famous, often banned, and widely pirated of all Chinese writers.
Okay.
That's actually not my take on him, because Mo Yan is the vice president of the Chinese Writers Association, and the Chinese Writers Association is actually a government body.
Yeah.
So he's actually a government-backed writer, and he's considered very important, of course. And then also, I think for me, I mean, because I'm speaking as a Chinese national, I see those kind of marketing strategy, especially in the United States, as a way to mark Chinese fiction as exotic tales that will provide an antithesis to American democracy. And so China will stay as an imaginary like enemy, the other side of the political spectrum or something. And the literary fiction becomes evidence of it. And then the other thing I want to mention, I think Nicky actually mentioned this in our meetings. So when we go to, I'm paraphrasing Nicky's words, when we go to like great Russian authors, such as Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, we like them, we admire them, because it's not we want to learn something about Russian history or Russian society from those books. We go to them for literature, right? But it's not, I don't think it's the same with the Chinese contemporary literature. That's why I think we need more voices like Censorship, because contemporary Chinese literature is actually very diverse.
I think fundamental. So part of what we've worked on over the years is working directly with the publishing industry in the U.S. Paper Republic, before it became sort of more of a nonprofit, we ran a publishing fellowship in Beijing 3 years in a row, inviting editors, international editors, to Beijing to spend a week getting to know writers, getting to know authors. And I think really the fundamental problem here is simply one of ignorance. The publishing industry in English-speaking countries simply knows nothing. It knows actually like zero, not even knowing where to start. And so really the only thing that everyone can agree on about China is that it has an authoritarian government. That's like the one fact that all Americans know for sure, is it's got a repressive government and the people must be suffering. Okay, so we'll start from there. And so we're talking, publishing decisions pretty much anywhere are made by individual editors fundamentally. Like you need, in order for a book to get translated and published, one person needs to go, this is worth my time. This book is like my other books. I think this will sell. I'm gonna take this project on. And so really thinking about it from the point of view of the publishers, of the editors, our job has been, okay, I'm gonna think like you, and I'm gonna try to explain what it is you're looking at. Like you've got one fact about China, which is that it has an authoritarian government. I'm gonna try to give you 2 facts about China. And then I'm going to try to give you 5 facts about China. And at some point, you'll have enough facts where you can sort of make an informed decision. So that's one way of, there's a sense of a lack of confidence when somebody goes into the situation, complete ignorance, that like, I just don't know. So give me some information, something I can hold on to. And so I think it's a natural thing then to hold on to the most surface things, to the labels. They pull out the labels because that gives you a sense of confidence. And if you have enough confidence, maybe you'll take a dive on this book. That's one way to come at it. And it's not good. We talk about Russian fiction or whatever, but English-speaking countries have had cultural commerce with Russian-speaking people and culture and literature for how long, you know, since they've existed. So there's sort of a basis of a sense of confidence, even if, you know, you don't really know that much about Russia or Russian history or Russian culture, at least you feel like you do.
Right.
And
Yep.
I think editors do not feel like they have any sense of confidence.
Yeah, so there's no confidence. Yep. You know, it's so interesting because these are questions that we grapple with constantly at China Institute as well, which is sort of, what is the prism through which we view China? And, you know, in some ways, I mean, in defense of, you know, the American public or whatever, including the publishers, et cetera, is the only cultural and political references that we have for a system that's different from ours is, firstly, it's like the Soviet Union. And I lived in Moscow right after the fall of Gorbachev, you know, for 3 years. And, you know, the Soviet Union really was a kind of a more oppressive society, that if there's no model for what exists in China today, which is, yes, there is an authoritarian government. Yes, and it's also a really vibrant society with a plethora of voices and all kinds of crazy, kooky, interesting stuff going on. So there's no reference for that for us here in America or anywhere, really. China is something that's never existed before. So I think Nick wanted to jump in.
I want to put in something a bit more positive. I know I said I knew nothing about science fiction, but I do think that we can confidently say that Chinese translated science fiction really does sell in America, in the UK, in English translation. And I mean, this is one of there are certain genre of which probably science fiction is the most important, but also young adult literature, which has no problems in getting across. You know, everybody loves it. If they love sci-fi, they love it.
Yep.
So the other way to go, which is probably a preferable way to go, rather than giving, you know, the publishing world this overall framework, give them enough context that they can decide which books are important enough for them to publish, is to go the other way, to go small, to just, you know, help one editor fall in love with one writer, to help an individual person fall in love with a voice or a style or the subject matter of an individual writer, to the point where they say, I don't even care if this writer is important in China. I don't care, you know, what people think of him or her. This book, I've fallen in love with this book, and I want to bring it out. And I think that does happen. I really wish it would happen more, because I think that's the right way to do it. It doesn't happen that much. It happened with like Three Body Problem. I think the fact that it's Chinese is great. People are like, cool, Chinese, but really they fell in love with the book itself.
Yeah, I was
so
just
that's wonderful.
Talk a little bit about Liu Cixin, the author of The Three Body Problem, and why it was so successful. I mean, you know, Barack Obama and Bill Gates were, you know, talking about how great it was. So why did Liu Cixin just have a good publicist here in the States, or what happened?
Well, he first of all has an imagination the size of an entire planet. So like, he's written books that just nobody else would have ever thought of. They're just sort of incredible. I think that, you know, we were just talking about this issue of confidence, and which exists both within publishers, but also readers. You know, readers need to have the confidence to take a book off the shelf and say, yeah, this is worth my time. And I think that, you know, to be very sort of not cynical, but sort of very pragmatic about it, one of the benefits of genre fiction is that it gives you that confidence. It comes with confidence built in. It's like, hey, it's science fiction. It's published by Tor. It's got like spaceships on the cover. It's gonna have aliens in it. It's gonna have, you know, all the stuff that I'm familiar with. And so that gives me as a reader enough confidence to pick out the book, because even if the Chinese stuff in there is weird and I'm like, ew, I don't want to read anything about China, I'm still going to have a story about space aliens. And that's really ultimately all I want. And so that's enough to give the reader the confidence to pick the book off the shelf. Right. And so I think that's great. I'll take it. You know, whatever gets people reading the books and like honestly falling in love with the literature. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So I do want to encourage people, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. And I see that some people have started typing in questions already, which is great. So please feel free to add your questions. So let me, I guess, ask, what now? What, you know, how does this corner of the literary world go about solving some of the problems that you've laid out? What do you guys think? And hopefully, Eric, you can talk to us a little bit about your upcoming field guide.
Yeah, I'll talk about the field guide in a second, but actually the first thing I wanted to say is that I think we need more people like Jianan. Part of the problem with whole novels is that they are high risk and high cost, both for the publisher to publish and the reader to read. We need more people who exist within the sort of the literary world that exists around publishing, places like the Millions, literary journals, websites, just even social media, whatever. These places where individual voices, it's easier for individual voices to be heard because it's not like you're not asking a publishing house to take a risk on an entire book. You can start writing, essays. Jianan's written essays about Yuhua, about her own writing about what's going on in China. So we have this sort of general information seeping in. We have more voices seeping in. There's more different voices because there are more channels for smaller bits of information. So that's one thing. I don't know, John, if you have any. I'd like not to give you or writers like you a job to do, but I feel like the more voices we have with these more sort of constant outlets for getting heard, the better.
Jianan, what do you think we need to do better?
Thank you for the nice words first, Eric. And I also think, Eric will talk about the field guide later. I have been a big fan, like a huge fan of Paper Republic for all these years, because I think all those journals, regardless of the, whether it's in the United States or in China, all those literary journals are trying to bring out a variety of like voices, right? And then also I think those literary journals try to fill in the gap of a power system, because for a power system, only those voices are considered important. Usually they are middle-aged male authors. They get, they get like attention. Other than that, the people are left out or marginalized. But if we bring in more voices, if we just bring in more voices, either speak for ourselves or speak for other marginalized or underrepresented voices, and then we can let others see, the contemporary Chinese culture is how we are talking about a lot of like different things. I think that's very important, and I think the Paper Republic has been doing these things all these years. So I'm grateful to that. And I also think Eric mentioned one point, I really like that. So when we talk about, I always, when I do translation, I only translate one author, that is Zhu Yue, because I'm a huge fan. And then
which author?
Zhu Yue, I will put it in the chat later.
Okay.
And then the thing about it is like, if I translate an author, that means I fell in love with the author. And it's like readers fell in love with a book. And then if we fell in love with the voice, we would do our best to share it with others because we are passionate about it. And then I think what we need to do is try to find the like-minded people. It's very hard, but if I'm passionate about it, I'll try to get it first published in a lot of literary journals. And then I will find other, editors who are in love with the same voice like I do. And then maybe from that, we can get a publisher. I don't know, I'm talking about a very idealistic picture. But I think that's how literature gets circulated to find the real audience. So
Okay, you know what? I think that there are a lot of great questions, so I think we should turn to questions. And
can I just briefly introduce the field guide? Sorry, we're plugging an upcoming publication here. Having just talked about the importance of falling in love with individual books and individual voices, we're actually also going the other direction, providing larger context. So we've got an upcoming publication, should be out at the end of March, called The Field Guide to Contemporary Chinese Literature. And so it's a short publication. It's probably going to be about 50 pages. It's got a number of essays in the front, thematic essays about Chinese literature, different aspects of Chinese literature, written by a wide variety of people, and then a directory of authors and publications and translations and publications in the back. So this is meant to be meant to be sort of a gentle introduction to what's out there. It's also meant to be sort of a reference work for people who have heard an author's name and want to know more, are curious of what's out there, saw a book on a shelf and aren't really sure what they're looking at. So this will be something to look out for. It's something we're very, very excited about, in the sort of two-pronged attack of providing like the macro view, providing context, and then the other prong being, you know, providing individual translations, individual voices, things for people to fall in love with. This is something that I think it's important for us to be sort of working on both angles at the same time. So the field guide is definitely on this side of things, and it's something I hope that everyone will look out for and read when it's published. Thank you.
Fabulous. Okay, let's see. So there's so many great questions. Gosh, let me see. Okay, so a question from Marilyn Gleistein is, can you please talk about some substantive qualities of what you three would define as literary or artistic or imaginative? Is it subject matter or style or kind of language? Right now you're talking in the periphery and I'm not learning anything about the literature itself. You know, can you tell us a little more specifically, you know, give us some definitions about your standards?
Oh,
Who wants to tackle that one?
well, I could say something quite limited about my translation experience and what I think is good. I mean, yeah, if I'm doing a novel, it has to be well written, has to be beautifully written. It has to have a good structure. It has to it has to really engage me. But surely that is what you'd want from any novel. I mean, I can't quite see why a Chinese novel in translation or in the original should be any different from another novel, any other language that deeply engages your passions, your emotions. And I think this is a very personal question.
Yeah.
But it's easy to tell bad writing. I mean, actually, it's almost easier to define bad writing.
Certainly is. I think we were talking about at the end of this, the three of us getting some authors or some writers or some pieces, like recommending things that we think are good or things that we've been reading recently. So maybe that would be the best way to answer that question.
Yeah. Well, feel free to jump in. I mean, Eric, you know, tell us what are some of the things you love to read?
Well, I mean, as Nicky says, this is a very, very personal, sort of a personal consideration. I like idiosyncratic voices. I like people who look at the same thing everybody else is looking at and see something different. And so the writers that I like to translate are often the weird ones, who just have sort of a different, like a slightly skewed perspective on society or the things that they're seeing. The two, I'll just do this now. The two writers, I know we were also supposed to talk about some sort of like contemporary people. Unfortunately, my favorite writers are either dead or have stopped writing. So here's a couple things that you can read. One is Wang Xiaobo, who I think is one of the best sort of contemporary Chinese writers. He's dead now, but one of the best contemporary Chinese writers out there.
What is it about? What's so great about him?
He's got a very sort of, like, if you want to talk about actual anti-authoritarian writing, he's very, very sly, very ironic. It takes the piss out of self-importance, out of sort of authoritarian points of view. Like there's, you know, how do I don't want to go overboard here, but he's got a very sort of individual way of letting the air out of self-importance and sort of, you know, what he sees in society around him. So that's one, and he's got more translations coming out probably in the next couple of years, so that's good news. The other is this.
All right, save your second one because we'll come back to that at the end.
Okay.
All right, another question from Charlie Hanneman. Do you think that collectively translators and publishers have a kind of Responsibility to be careful about the scope of the literature that we translate and publish outside of China? As the target audience will only see what is chosen for them to see, because that will ultimately reflect how the audience views China.
I think that's one for Jianan.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's like the publisher should take all those responsibility, because, you know, when we talk about the publishing industry, we are also talking about a bunch of different things. There are agents who play a role of that. There are editors who take care of the, the literary quality, the literary side. And there are, there are like marketing staff who are taking care of that side. So it's like, it's sort of like a business. But I would say, as a Chinese reader, I think publishers, I would like to see, and I hope to see, publishers are more careful in marketing the books in the right way. Are more careful about the representation of this book. What kind of like a first impression they want to leave on the readers. And I think those things need
so not perpetuating political stereotypes and that kind of thing.
Not to perpetuate a political stereotype, which is not there. I would say that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Another great question. Can you expand on the recent movements in contemporary Chinese literature that is experimental, especially in the context of digital integration? So this person is talking about including a QR code on the page of the author reading out aloud their own work, or the chapter by chapter release of online novels, etc.
Not me.
There's
is the stuff that's being released, chapter by chapter online, is there good literature there?
I don't want to sound like a jerk, but
Not
I haven't found it. That's sort of, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, the sheer quantity of literature that's being produced online and consumed through digital devices. I think there are, we sort of bemoan the lack of reading here in the West among younger people, but younger people in China are reading like gangbusters on their phones, on whatever. They're producing huge amounts of writing and they're consuming, and it's sort of blurred the line between writers and readers. I think 99% of it is genre fiction of it just doesn't sound like an elitist jerk here, but it's not great. It's not great. There is cream that floats to the top, but the cream that floats to the top then goes into the traditional publishing channels. It comes out as a book, and then you can buy it in the bookstore. The stuff that stays online is often, it's there for a reason. I occasionally over the years have been like, there must be something good there. I'm gonna pull up my britches and I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna find this stuff, and it's like a couple of days later, I just give up in exhaustion. There's such a huge quantity of it, and so little of it is good. I figured, why not just wait for that cream to float to the top, same as everybody else.
Okay.
Jianan, did either of you have anything to add to that?
I'm not I don't read genre fiction that often, so I don't know much about that. But I would just raise one example. Jinyu Chen, who is I put in a chat like lately. His book will come out like later. So he is also one of my favorite authors in China. And then his book was actually firstly circulated on the website. And when when the chapters of that book was put in sort of installment on the website, he actually interacted with the anonymous, readers. And then, but the thing he did was, first of all, he only got, I think, encouragement from the audience. And which is all, is that the audience didn't affect his literary decision, because he is already a very much experienced writer. So he knows what he is going to do. And the other thing is the website is well controlled, which means the audience is already selected to be there. So, yeah.
Okay, here's a question from Helen Jiang. There was a fascinating Economist article about Chinese science fiction, and it made a number of points about censorship challenges for Chinese English translators and publishers and distributors. Can you all please comment on those challenges and potential? Well, this is a webinar on literary translation. I'm curious to know about making sure that, how you make sure the translations actually get into the hands of readers. So I guess a question about censorship.
there's definitely a movement within the larger sci-fi movement of using science fiction as a tool for social criticism. And I think a lot of that is sort of, it's like near fiction, near future type sci-fi. It's sort of pointing out where society is going, or exaggerating some elements of society in order to make a political point or some social criticism. Hao Jingfeng's Folding Beijing, I think, is a very good example. So this is very much, you know, it's fantasy, it's science fiction, but it's very much making a point about sort of class realities of Beijing cities. And that, I think, was later banned inside China, but it was translated. There is, I mean, you know, the government's wise to that sort of thing, like using allegory to criticize reality is something that Chinese writers have been doing ever since there have been Chinese writers, I think. So the government's, they're no dummies. They know what's going on. So they're looking out for that. I'm not sure that I think if it gets written in Chinese, it can be translated. What we choose for translation I don't think it has that much to do with whether the book was successfully published inside the country or not. Obviously, we've been talking about, you know, the added promotional boost that can come from the Banned in China label. But I don't think that translators end up like not translating a thing because it was banned in China.
Yeah.
Nicky, have you ever seen?
That we had Liu Cixin gave a hugely popular talk at China Institute a couple of years ago, and you know, we were practically people hanging from the rafters. It was his, you know, Chinese groupies. I mean, it was amazing. It was really fantastic. But he talked about this a little bit. He was very funny. He said that I don't remember the specifics of what he had written, but he had something that was politically, you know, sensitive in the beginning of, I guess it was the three-body problem. I don't know. And the translator or the, you know, publisher, not the translator, the publisher in China said, no, you know, this is just not going to fly. And so he said, basically, he took that chunk and stuffed it in the middle of the book. and the translators just didn't care. As long as it wasn't kind of prominently right there in their face, it was fine.
So what it was is that the book actually starts off in the Cultural Revolution,
yes.
Which the authorities inside China are still not. They still prefer you didn't. You know, right. It's like it's not going to get you banned, but we'd prefer you didn't. And so in the Chinese edition, they stuck the Cultural Revolution part in the middle as kind of like a flashback.
There you go. Okay.
And then in the English edition, they moved it up front. And then people inside China were like, where are these, you know, translators with their political agenda? And they were like,
okay, that explains. So, because the version I've read, of course, does start with the culture. Got it.
Yeah. So that you could see that as restoring the original. That doesn't, I don't know. That does. I've heard of that happening where the translator gets the real manuscript from the author, not the version that was able to be published inside China. But I don't think that's not a big factor. I don't think.
Okay, well, you know, we only have a few more minutes, so and a lot of the questions are asking for you to tell us, like, what should we be reading? What are your favorite books? So let's do that. Let's have you all, you know, go around the room, and why don't you each give us and type it into the, you know, add it to the chat so that people can copy and paste it into their own documents and save it. But you know, give us your three favorite books or three favorite authors. Go ahead. You want to start, Nicky?
Okay, all right. I'm ready to paste
some of your three favorite books. Make it hard to do the top three.
Okay, so I'll just talk you through that. Two women authors, Lu Min. Unfortunately, the top two, you can't read them because they're not in translation.
Okay.
Women are really underrepresented, but those are the couple that you might want to look out for because they're really good women writers.
And it's Lu Min. Who else?
Lu Min and Lin Bai.
Okay, and tell us why.
Oh, sorry, I didn't actually click go. You've got it in front of you now.
Okay. So why do you love them? What's great about them?
Lu Min writes beautifully about, you know, relationships between people in families. She's very funny. She's quite sharp. Lin Bai, the next one, writes about very much, you know, her inner feelings as a woman growing up, her ambivalent relationships with men and with women, mostly with women. She doesn't write very much about her relationships with men. And I think she's fantastic. And I think she has a really broad appeal. Li Juan has just...
Give us one that we actually can read.
All right, next one. The next two. Li Juan writes about the Kazakh herders where she lives in Xinjiang.
Wow.
Two books of hers are out this week, different publishers. Winter Pastures and Distant Sunflower Fields. Okay, my next one, I'm being very cheeky. Monkey. There's a new translation of Monkey King by Julia Lovell.
Oh,
and
yes.
it's hilariously funny, and it's out this week.
I'm dying to read it. Yep.
And finally, my favorite love story of all time is by Rao Pingru, who's from Shanghai, although he died last year. It's called Our Story. And it is the most beautiful, beautiful book. And I hope that has come through on, from me to all panelists, and you should be able to see all of those.
That's so wonderful. Okay, so Jianan, you want to go? You go.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm not going to recommend Wang Xiaobo, but I want to add a nod to him. I really love Wang Xiaobo. But the books I'm going to recommend are, so first of all, let me start with something like unusual. I really, really admire a Malaysian author who writes in Chinese. His name is Zhang Guixin. So one of his books that I enjoyed the most is called My South Sea Sleeping Beauty. I will put it in the chat. It's actually available in the English translation by Columbia University Press. So it's like old, university translation. And then I really like, I mentioned Jinyu Chen. So Jinyu Chen's book, Blossoms, which is like a sensational, which was is still sensational in China. So I think the English translation will come out either this year or just sometime soon. Oh, it's already out. I don't know. I mean, I will also put in the chat Jinyu Chen because he's.
Why do you love Jinyu Chen's Blossoms?
So Blossoms, because I'm from Shanghai. Jinyu Chen writes a lot about, just ordinary, like people from all walks of life in Shanghai. And he writes about the book, or covers a little bit about the Cultural Revolution and also the period, like the 1980s or something, the period after that. But the thing about it, the thing which is amazing is you can get the texture, the richness of Shanghai, like life in Shanghai. You can get the atmosphere of what life in Shanghai was. And then originally, I'm very curious to see the translation, by the way, because originally Jinyu Chen writes in the Shanghai dialect. So I don't know, how the translator will bring out that side. So I'm looking forward. So that's Blossom. Yeah. And then the third book I'm going to recommend, it's also a recent translation. Did by Nicky, our very own Nicky. So I want to recommend Yong The Chili Bean Paste Clan. Yong, because a lot of readers put into the question, what are some young authors in China you want to recommend? So if you want to get a taste of what the younger generation, like what the young authors are doing in China, so Yong's book maybe will be a good way to start. So yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, Eric, you go.
Well, now all the good ones are taken. I'm furiously reassessing here. Okay, so I already said Wang Xiaobo, and I encourage everybody to go read that story. I'm going to send another link here to one of my other favorite writers named Yong, who's from Nanjing or thereabouts, and is just an incredibly idiosyncratic, weird voice. I love him dearly. He's just a very odd person. He's got his own.
Telling me with idiosyncratic and weird. So give us a little more.
No. I'm trying. It's hard. You got to read the story. He's got this weird sort of like. He seems to be experiencing the world around him differently than the rest of us do, and so it's very sort of like sensory, very odd. Like he sees imagery, he sees patterns in the world around him that we might not see. This particular story that I'm sending in there is about, it's sort of him as a child in 3 brushes with death. And death is personified as this silver tiger that appears to him, and is either his death or someone else's death. And it's just these sort of amazing descriptions of this tiger that doesn't exist, bringing death into his world. It's just a very, very, very cool story. So I like him a lot. He stopped writing. That's unfortunate. I'm working on a novella of his right now. I was also going to say Yang Ge, in addition to the chili bean paste clan. She's also got a collection of short stories called Strange Beasts of China, translated by Jianan Qian. And I think that's out already. I think it's just recent. Also really good. And since everyone else took mine, my last, I'm going to go in the other direction and talk about one of the greats, Jia Pinghua, who is sort of one of the 1980s sort of big. He's one of the big name writers now, but specifically Feidu. What did they call it? What did they call Feidu?
Ruin capital,
ruin capital or abandoned capital.
Right.
And so this is the book that kind of, I would say, sort of made his reputation. And this is like the future literary lion as a young man full of beans. Wow. And just this wonderful sort of romp through a fictional version of Xi'an, and kind of just tearing through all the depredation of Chinese society and the weird sort of moral failings, and as what he's seeing as sort of this collapse of traditional ideals and traditional ethics. And it's just so much fun to read. It's so much fun to read, and it's just really meaty. It's something you can dig your teeth into.
So can I ask you a really dumb question, which is, so you were talking about the depredation and the sort of dark side of Chinese society, and I feel like so much of what I read, like including the chili bean paste gang, it's just kind of depressing, right? It's there's a lot of darkness. And
Ruin Capital is fun. It's depressing.
Okay, but what I wanted to ask you is, is there any book that you can recommend that's a little bit more cheery?
I don't know. Chinese writers don't really do cheery.
Okay.
Oh yeah, lots of young adult literature.
Yeah,
I put in a link for a Chinese book for young readers, which is run by Helen Wong, who is also with us, I think, and some other people. And some of the kids' books are very. I don't mean kids' illustrated books. I mean the teen books are really engaging and a lot of fun to read.
Wonderful. That's so great. So, okay, we're just on time. You are so brilliant. You have absolutely surpassed our wildest dreams in terms of how fascinating this conversation could be. I want to thank you all so much. And again, sort of reiterate, this is so much exactly what China Institute is all about. And we're so happy to have you are now officially part of the China Institute family, whether you like it or not. So
yeah, happy to be here.
It's all about adding nuance and adding, sort of trying to get into the complexity of China. And you are just all brilliant, literally cultural translators. And we're so delighted to have you. Thank you. I hope everybody has been able to, copy all the wonderful books, cut and paste all the wonderful books that you shared with us.
Yeah, please do. And we will send you all copies of the field guide when it's.
Yes. We all are going to be looking for the field guide. I'm assuming that the field guide will have books to read, right?
It'll list it's essentially, one of its functions is as a bibliography, so you'll be able to see for each of the authors where you can find things to read.
Yeah, fabulous. And also Paper Republic, lots of wonderful stuff that you can find there to the audience. Thank you so much to the audience for joining. We can't wait to see you again. We're doing a very fun thing tomorrow at noon, which is we've got a little mini series called Pieces of China, which is just 15 minutes long, and it's luminaries telling the story of China one object at a time. And tomorrow we have Jim Fallows, the wonderful American journalist who wrote a book about China called Airborne, about the Chinese aviation industry. And he's going to talk about one very harrowing flight that he co-piloted in a 4-seater Cirrus airplane from Changsha to Zhuhai. So tune into that one. It'll be a lot of fun. But mostly just thank you all. You're brilliant. And thank you for helping us tell the story of China.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.